Okay, I'm here to kick things off for the third and final session from our AI and marketing, sales, and growth. My name is Eric Vogt. So I think my session today will be primarily looking at the idea of signals as kind of the core idea, the core focus. And I think signals are um, something we talk a lot about intuitively. We may not do it consciously, and I'm going to try to challenge us to think about them more concisely or more in a more focused way. Because I think detecting the signal is perhaps the number one aspect uh, to growth to growing a company, and I'll explain why I think that's the case. So I am building on top of my colleagues. On the first session, we had Libor talking about marketing, and I think in that session, the signal we saw several important signals, but one important one was that buyers are becoming increasingly aware and their opinions are starting to be created through engaging with AI tools before you even get a chance to talk to them. They're also using AI in their own ecosystems, and your visibility as a company is no longer kind of constrained to conferences or advertisements. And I think AI systems are also summarizing vendors before you even see them. So those are some of the signals that Libor shared. This is also kind of resonating with some of the research out there, where clear positioning and structure differentiation is more important than ever before. And then on Lamisa's session, we looked at AI as a tool for augmenting the sales process. And Lamis, the signal there is that AI can accelerate tactical sales work. It can do summaries, it can do outreach, you can do prioritization. You can also use it to do research about your prospects to monitor your company, the companies that you're engaging with in a more proactive and systematic way. But Lamis was also key to remind us that AI can scale these things really well, but it doesn't replace just judgment. And then she introduced the caste system as a way of structuring your thinking about this. And then thanks to the audience on Basecamp, uh, many of you engaged and shared your stories as we were getting started. And we saw some signals there too. For example, one of them is that we're already seeing demand substitution. So I think one of the lines that I'm pulling in later into the presentation is the idea that people aren't buying translations anymore. They're doing their translations using AI, sort of that substitution pattern. It's not hypothetical. That's a real signal that we're seeing. Um, and then organizations are also trying to operationalize AI without losing their identity. I think that signals was quite strong. So we had project managers and operations teams, directors, leaders, all indicating that they're trying to make AI practical and structured, but there's a concern about staying relevant without becoming too generic. And when all these tools are here, how do we maintain who we are? So, and today I'm going to be talking about growth. Now, growth by its nature is a company-wide phenomenon. It's not something that a marketing department or a sales department or operational department can do by itself. But it turns out that the patterns and the signals that you want to look for as a company are very similar to the patterns and signals you look for as an individual. So even if you're not the CEO, and even if you are a CEO, you may not feel like you're completely in control of the entire system that you're responsible for. But I hope to be able to kind of show those signal patterns for us. So I'll be talking about this in 5 parts, starting out with why companies fail. And it turns out that there's a lot of research about this that we can leverage from. And what is the shift in the signal? What am I talking about when it comes to signal systems? And then I'm going to introduce this growth learning loop, which shouldn't surprise any of you. It's just kind of reinforcing a capture, structure, interpret, act cycle, and why that's so important when applying AI to this ecosystem. It doesn't really have a nice pronounceable acronym to it, like CAST, SHIA, or maybe SHIA, something like that. But I think the essence is still really important to take home. Now I'll talk about how to apply it, kind of depending on where your role is within the organization. And then I'll talk about tools, but I really want to emphasize that there are so many tools out there this isn't an advertisement for tools. I'm not trying to promote certain tools. I'm not trying to promote certain solutions. In fact, I think it's more important than ever to stay when you're thinking about the signal of what makes growth happen, you have to understand that before you think about the tools, because the pattern, the growth system that you're trying to build, the signal system you're trying to build is going to be dependent. The the tools will be a reflection of the system that you're the signal system that you're trying to build, not the other way around. So I'm going to say something pretty contrary to what a lot of the things you're going to see it on LinkedIn. A lot of people talk about growth strategy, like you have to have the right strategy. But researchers, when they look at this, we've realized that growth isn't really a function of strategy. And strategy is, of course, an important part of growth. But a good strategy on its own doesn't guarantee growth. Like the strategy has to be connected to the signals underneath and it has to react to those signals. So the strategy that works today may not work tomorrow. And if you don't capture the signals early, you're going to potentially lose despite having a fantastic strategy. Another thing I'd like to highlight here is that we humans have a tendency to overrate our own judgment and our own ability to detect patterns. And we think that our strategy is a lot better than it actually is. There's a pretty famous book called Good to Great, and there's also other kind of leadership books and management books that kind of emphasize this importance of a certain kind of a business strategy being equating to growth, like it must be. And if you look at if you analyze the way that leadership teams discuss their successes and their failures, almost always they look to external forces to explain why they didn't succeed. And they will look internal, they'll say, we are awesome. We're the reason why we were successful. But very often, neither of those is true. It's actually a lot more nuanced than that. So, okay, let's start out with the stall. Like, why do companies stall? So, um, the, the, the I think what I'm going to talk about in this section is what does the research tell us about why companies stall? And why is it that AI is basically doing the same thing? So as I mentioned, it's growth doesn't stall for the reasons that we don't grow for the reasons we think, and we also don't stall for the reasons we think. So I think the the narrative is important, and anybody who is responsible for anything needs to have appropriate storytelling narrative. But underneath that signal, there are um, some other things going on. So, Isa, if you wouldn't mind loading up our first poll, I'm going to get kind of a quick pulse on the on our audience, and I'd like for everybody to reflect a little bit on what do you think is the reason your organization isn't growing or growing faster? Is it because you can't generate enough leads? You're not seeing enough win rates? Is it because capacity can't keep up with what you're doing? That you could sell this stuff, but you just can't build the capabilities fast enough to deliver it? Is it margins or is it rates? Is it just getting hammered by discounts, or is it alignment or strategies, or is that kind of an internal incoherence, or it doesn't feel like the strategy is the right one for this? So if everybody could, and if you don't really know, or if you don't have an opinion, not sure is also a signal. I'm actually very interested in kind of hearing your thoughts about that also. So yeah, so I think Libor, based on sort of your perception of things, what do you think uh, are the most, what do you think our audience will indicate as the most, the biggest issue with preventing growth?
Well, I think it seems to confirm that everybody thinks the same. Yes. So to grow, you need to have the pipeline, the sales, the marketing engine running, and then grow. But of course, as you will explain in the next few slides, it's a bit more complicated. So I think basically it confirms the typical modus operandi, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the belief that pipeline in the sales is the most likely one, and I think that's consistent with with what I thought as well. So, but let's look a little bit deeper to this. First of all, I'm going to reference a pretty famous study by Bain, and this is going all the way back to 2008, but they dug into the reasons why companies stalled. And I don't think that the substantive substance has changed very much. I mean, first of all, it's very normal. Lots of companies stall. And I think most of them, this is the surprise, most of them are actually driven by internal reasons. And if we look at this Harvard Business Review article, which I can recommend for a quick read, I'm grabbing a graph from that here could see that the 87% of the factors associated with a stalled company are within management's control. So that, and if you look at the top one here, the premium position captivity, there's innovation management breakdown, and premature core abandonment. These are all signal related problems. These are places in which the emphasis and the focus was not directed towards what the available market signals were. And to be fair, many companies get surprised by factors that are outside of their control. And yes, there's regulatory actions, there's economic downturns, there's geopolitical change, there's changes in technology. But all these things are a tiny fraction of what the total picture generally is. And if we zoom up to kind of the highlights here, the signal blindness actually accounts for almost a quarter of the 30-year longitudinal study here that indicated when companies fail to pick up shifts in customers' behavior, that leads to a loss in growth. And some of it, 13% is innovation drift. I certainly have had my fair share participating with these, which is what I would call activity without meaningful evolution or activity without progress. These are kind of unanchored opportunities to sort of innovate. It's innovation theater. It looks like you're doing something. You talk about doing something, but it's not actually connecting to the market behavior that you're trying to look for. There's also a core misallocation issue, which is chasing growth away from the core. I've seen this also in firsthand where the company is trying to go so quickly towards some new shiny object that they're not trying to optimize or strengthen their core capabilities. And that, I mean, granted, there's sort of a two different sort of directions here. Like, are you not moving fast enough, or are you moving too fast? And the core misallocation, though, means that you have some base capabilities that you're trying to continue delivering on, but you abandon that essentially because you're so convinced that the future is going to be in a new direction that you abandon that core capability. So, and I think gaps are real, and I think looking at the behavior of and what people are saying in our industry, people do say, hey, we don't have the skills to match the strategy. AI first, we have to have AI everywhere. We don't have AI skills. And to some extent, that might be a bigger percentage now than 9%, but I'm going to argue that it's not as big as people think, that the signal pattern underneath is actually more important. So let's look at what that looks like in our world. So this is a composite story. So I'm making up this company, Northlight Translations. We've got 250 people, 45 million in revenue. Okay, we've got 5 years of strong double-digit growth, and then it flattens. So this is a very simple model just to kind of walk through what I'm talking about here. So the signal, maybe 18 months out, 18 months ago, the top 10 accounts for Northlight Translations started asking about AI capabilities in QBRs. And the account managers and the salespeople might have saw, well, our revenues are good, our relationship good, the client's happy. We're just going to call that a win. And yeah, we're watching this AI thing, we're keeping an eye on it, but generally speaking, and I saw a lot of this, we all saw a lot of this where people said, oh, we're already on AI. We've been doing AI for decades. The machine translation is essentially AI, so we're already AI capable. And then the drift starts happening, and we saw this also where the MT post edit ratio crept up, maybe from 35 to 58% on the largest line of business. Margin holds, nobody flags it. It's sort of like, yeah, we see this, we'll adapt, we can kind of adjust to this. And then all of a sudden, the win rate just starts dropping off, and the RFP languages starts talking about content operations instead of translation. And then by the time that your largest accounts renew at like 40% less than what they were before, and some of your business has been sent to another AI first partner or some other capability, by the time that happens, it's too late. So I think the strategy stayed the same in this case, and the strategy was a good one. It was delivering to margin. It was successful. Clients, revenue, the clients, the employees, and the shareholders were all happy. But the signal was changing, and and Northlight didn't adapt. So I think that's kind of how I'm explaining this thing. So I think AI is having some similar patterns to this problem, where both MIT and Harvard Business Review over the past 12 months have also been publishing many different research results that essentially give us the same signals as the Bain story. It's just they're happening faster. So in this case, 88% of companies report using AI, according to MIT. And many of them see stalled impact and unclear ROI when it comes to AI initiatives. So only a few of them are actually translating AI capabilities into real value, really seeing it. Now, does that mean it's not worth doing? Absolutely not. But I'll get to that later. Um, but the data definitely seems to be signaling that the AI matters. So this is a direct quote from our audience. We don't. This is what the client was telling them, the signal. And I'm thinking about Kodak here because the famous Kodak situation where they were leading in digital cameras and then they ended up kind of completely missing the boat because they didn't read the clear signals. They were happy, their org structure was solid. Anyway, the signal here is we don't need translation. We use AI now. So that's a real outreach signal. And I think this person had quoted 792 prospects that said basically the same thing. So the reaction to the signal, first of all, don't argue with it, right? Because it's not actually a price objection. It's the buyer has redefined the category. There's a disagreement um, about what it is that they're looking for. When I talk to some both clients myself as well as um, to people who talk to clients often, there's a lot of similar stories here where the expectation is we need something deeper. We need a strategy. We need a deeper engagement. We need a different service than just translation. We need something much more integrated or much more supportive. And I think that signal is very clear out there. So if we look at that, what's going on underneath is it a temporary budget reflex? Sometimes it is. Sometimes a reduction in spending has very little to do with AI. It's just about the performance of the company itself. Or is there a demand shift? And I think it's in many, I'm not arguing that this applies to everybody in this audience. I'm trying to say that the importance is in paying attention to that signal. So we want to ask ourselves, is that an opportunity for a reframe? These things aren't necessarily the same. So, and then when you when you accept the signal and you read what's going on underneath of it in a sober, practical way, and then you can reposition where you can add the most value. And so, for example, in my my North Lights translation company, maybe the real value here is in emphasizing trust and validation, risk ownership, maybe multilingual governance. These are bigger container problems than translation, and we've seen in our market, of course, lots of people responding with this language, and some of them are actually delivering real changes to how they're delivering trust or how they're delivering validation capabilities. But I'm not going to get into use cases too much here, but there's some really interesting stories out there. I'll tell you about one in particular, which is a uh, the ability to generate emails for target campaigns in sort of non-core locales. And I think the traditional model, let's say Mother's Day was the example that that my colleague Elizabeth Milkovitz has shared. She's mentioned this kind of this ad campaign for Mother's Day, and if you have an English copy that says, "Hey, you should buy some things for Mother's Day," and then you simply translate that, even if you're compliant with the style guides and the glossaries and all the different control structures we put in place, you could also generate an authentic um, ad or email campaign that's written for that for a target locale in the style and the feeling and the tone of that locale from scratch. So you don't necessarily translate from English. You can generate the content directly with the Gen AI, and sometimes it yields better results than trying to translate. So if we're repositioning around that trust infrastructure, then that's the kind of solution that we want to try to target, not the we want to do words faster. We want to figure out how to do segments cheaper. So I think Lamy said and Libor both hit this point really strongly, so I'm not going to belabor this, but the AI can go spectacularly wrong and really quickly. Bad data can yield fast. It just does bad things faster. Weak workflows just creates more chaos, more edge cases, more. You can create a shallow adoption. This is kind of again, kind of innovation theater or activity theater. It looks like you're doing a lot, but you're not actually converting this to value. And then, of course, governance. And anybody who's heard me talk for more than 5 or 15 minutes, it's hard for me to avoid bringing up the word governance. It's like who is deciding? How are you controlling? How are you putting in the guardrails and the circuit breakers and the accountability infrastructure into how you're building these capabilities? And the consequences are very real. I mean, these are kind of amalgamated cautionary tales, but if you are AI translating um, things, it's MT, same problem. You can easily run into a situation where um, not only is the AI or the MT AI capability translating something into a language that the 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 source is not doesn't understand what it is that they're producing, like they can't read the language that they're producing this stuff into, but it can also, that stuff gets out there and then can be siphoned up as reference material for training future models. And so you end up with this kind of poisoned cycle here where not only are you generating bad content, but you're investing in bad future capabilities as well. And of course, hallucinated medical copy. And then, of course, AI answer engine optimization can confidently name a competitor in as the preferred choice in something where you are actually the best candidate for it. So these are all things that AI can kind of signal both from the standpoint of giving your customers the wrong information about you, or if you are you're trying to reach your end customers as a sort of a localization entity within a large organization. You can also have a disconnect with your target and customers as well. So now getting practical about this. So I think some ways of thinking about what's stalling here, like what are the top stories, yours or the industries which are actually broken. These are rhetorical. You feel free to kind of comment in the meeting chat if you'd like, just to share your position. But from a practical standpoint, I would recommend taking a step back and thinking about what are the misses that you're experiencing in your particular instance? What are the stall stories that you're witnessing, either yours, your clients, or your peers? And then map them to one of the Bain stall types. And then think about where are you most exposed as a result. So you can run an audit, kind of an AI honesty audit as well, to look at where is there AI activity versus true AI integration. And if you're a team of one, which many of us are, you don't have to do all of these things. Just kind of use these as triggers or prompts to sort of think about which signals do you want, what stall signals do you want to look at that could be influencing you. So I think Yeah, so Jose, I'll get to that question later. Let's leave that out there for a minute. I think that I'm going to put that in one in the Q&A if that's okay, because I think that's more of let's think about the actual real signals that we're seeing. So the signal shift. Okay, so I'm arguing that that this is not a strategy problem, it's a signal problem. And the signal is telling us where to play and how to win. And if you're paying attention to those, then you're more likely to thrive. And I think growth is a system, and a bunch of different things have to work well for an organization to grow. Like you have to know what your clients want, and you have to detect the signal and adapt your product to what your market is asking for. Then you have to figure out how to optimize your win experience. Like how do you understand and convert that into an offer and then sell that, and then you need to onboard it and deliver it. And I think you also need to have kind of understand the story, the system that you think is working in this case, and be willing to challenge that. Um, I think some of the feedback that we got from the chat, the signal that I was picking up is that um, the ICP refinement with AI is something that they are exploring. And this is ideal customer profile refinement with AI. And I think that's exactly a strong use case for that particular type of signal, where using AI to kind of look at who is your ideal customer based on the strengths of your organization, and then be able to convert that into some kind of uh, the alignment with what your capabilities are, with how you sell it, with the what you want to emphasize in your selling process, and then synchronize that with your strategy. And so in our industry, we have some signals that we get from the industry reports. So, for example, Slater talks about they're reporting single-digit growth, and some sectors of the market are actually decreasing. I think CSA is kind of talking about the a number of workflows that are essentially either MT assisted or completely MT. uh, that number is I think very nuanced because it depends on what you mean by MT assisted. And then the AI first, I mean, Slater Pulse or the buyer surveys are sort of signaling this AI first concept, like the buyers are asking for this or increasingly naming this particular sort of whatever this means AI first as a core capability. Um, so I think this is the industry signals, and I think all of us in this particular audience are probably already familiar with that. So how do systems fail when the signals aren't good? There's four main ways that this can happen. One is the signal is missed altogether. The second is the signal is distorted and they get filtered through bias, hierarchy. Personally, I've seen more damage being done by the politics of a senior leadership team or by a group of leaders who are imposing their opinion and ignoring the signals. And so we've seen some famous cases, like Kodak is one of them, where the leadership team was very comfortable with the strategy that they had, and they simply rejected the signals that were the warning signs. IBM famously, there's that whole, nobody's going to have a PC at home. Like, why would somebody need a computer? That is a classic case where somebody's individual opinion as a leader can override the signal and lead the entire system in the wrong direction. Um, Now, the signals don't move is another big gap. If we have a signal and we don't pay attention to it, we don't we or more we are aware of a change, but we don't do anything about it, then you might as well not know about it. I mean, so you kind of have to see the signal, you have to clarify it, make sure that it's true. The signals aren't sort of giving anything. Uh, the data exists, but it lives in some kind of format that nobody can kind of read or can't lead to a decision, or you choose not to actually do anything about it. So let's do another poll. And then while this next poll is really like what signals are most broken in your kind of environment, what you think of is the biggest signal. And meanwhile, I'm just going to sort of turn to Jose here. Legal and healthcare firms have okay, so this is a reluctance of using AI. I think that legal and healthcare firms are actually a lot further ahead on this than people realize. I think partly because there's new business models at stake here. So first of all, like discovery, there's a huge demand for discovery, and being able to do a synthesis of a vast number of documents is putting a lot of paralegals out of business because they are very quickly able to extract signal from or red flags or concerns from materials there. And there's also an increasing awareness that not all content that is healthcare or legal adjacent is also high criticality. And we see new kinds of use cases where people are using AI to answer basic questions and they're not going to a law firm to ask those questions or going to AI to ask those questions. And so we're seeing the smart kind of industry players are starting to recognize that their customers, people who seek legal advice or seek kind of clarity or understanding, are are accessing that information through non-traditional ways, and they're seeing their market changing. Their signal is changing. So I think they are adapting as well as they think about how do they modify their services to respond to a changing demand characteristics of their industry. Okay, do we have the results from the poll?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
So in this case, we have sales. The signals aren't captured very well. 46%, so it's almost half. Um, okay, that's interesting. I think that generally, this maps to the general industry that we're in. In my sense, in my feeling, like delivery is generally a reactive function in most of localization. Like we assume that we can scale up with in most cases, external resources. So the ability to sort of find resources who can do a certain job as a labor arbitrage kind of model, or if you're in the tech industry, you can find ways of scaling up very quickly to new customers. And I think the tech side of things is intrinsically more scalable. So really, if you feel like that pipeline is essentially able to absorb everything that you can send to it, then sales would appear to be that. And the good news is that AI does have a great potential in this area. So in sort of the homework side of this, if when you have some time to sort of think about this a little bit, thinking about where the stall is happening, let's use the sales is kind of a key area here, but I don't want to go into this too much because Lamise did such a fantastic job about this last week. There are ways of kind of extracting signal out of the sales information, but if that signal isn't, if the data is no good, let's say your CRM is filled with there's poor discipline and the data in there isn't up to date and it's not kind of valid, then you can extract a bunch of information from your Salesforce instance, for example, and then end up with some pretty weak signals. So it is important that you sort of think about where the data is coming from and whether or not the extrapolated patterns that you're looking for can be trusted. But I do think that analyzing your losses, it's very tempting just to move on and forget about it, but analyzing them and really understanding where there may have been a missed signal, or where there's a signal that will be important for you to address as a market is really, really critical. But don't try to do it all at once. These are just kind of things that you can start with. Okay, so the learning loop. So capture, structure, interpret, act. Like I think AI can do some of this, and humans can do parts of this. And I think the AI as a capture tool is probably the strongest use case in my opinion, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination the only one. So yes, AI can sort of take meeting notes, and it can you can prompt it to respond with kind of key action items, and but it can also look for different themes. And I think Gong had already put together capabilities like this. Oh, I don't know, it's at least 5 years ago when I was looking at this, where all the sales calls were being recorded, and Gong was doing kind of a system-wide assessment of all of the different conversations, who is talking about what were the keywords, what are the themes, and all these. So in one dashboard, you could really accumulate um, like a summary of all the conversations that were happening within the organization from one place. And then you can look at keywords and how they're trending. And so these tools are out there. If you don't have them, though, then just about there's gazillions of free and paid tools that can capture these. And my problem personally is I have multiple technology ecosystems, so I have to work with like six of them, and it's super annoying. So that's my beef about it. But structuring using AI to structure it is also pretty valuable. And I think if you take the input and ask and I think let's say GPT or Claude or Perplexity or any of these kind of foundation models can do a pretty good job of synthesizing this against what it knows your capabilities to be, which you can tell it, and it can use that to amplify what kind of signal is it. It can help disambiguate different kinds of signals. Some of them are riskier than others. Some of them are more actionable than others, and help interpret it. And then, of course, the biggest problem is the conversion of those signals into some kind of action. So use AI for summary and tagging, use it for pattern detection, use it for brainstorming, use it for sparring, as Lamise put it, or next best action drafts. And then the humans stay in the context and accountability side of this pattern. And of course, AI doesn't fix it, it amplifies it. In fact, there's so many horror stories to this. But instead of amplifying the horror stories, I also want to amplify the consequences of inaction. So if you imagine two different companies that are both tinkering around with AI tools, one of them tries and fails for a year to try to get their signal from their data from their sales team, get that signal up into a coherent message that the senior leadership team can action. Uh, but they've tried it for a year. And the other one says, Eric said that most of these fail anyway. Let's just wait until somebody else has figured this out. At the end of a year, the company that attempted and failed now has an enormous amount of knowledge about kind of how this works, why it doesn't, and then which parts of it worked and which ones don't. Now, a word of caution about failure. Failure should be celebrated, but it also should be contextualized. And so there's it's a very dangerous to burn your political capital as a on some shiny AI capability that promises too much and then under delivers. But if you advertise it as incremental, then it's more likely to be successful. There's another story here that about a company who tried to deploy an AI in our industry, and the rebellion in the troops was so severe that they basically nobody wanted to use it. They complained that it was crappy. And because it really hadn't been advertised as an iterative kind of process, it was like, here's this new way you're going to be doing these things with very poor change management. The reaction was so bad that they ended up abandoning the whole thing. And now the next time they try to launch an AI capability, it's going to be even weaker than it's going to be even harder, right? Because now you already have immunized your core stakeholders against change by foisting something on them with poor change management kind of strategies. So yeah, AI doesn't fix the system; it amplifies it, but also not trying to do something is also bad. So buyer intent signals to track. So the capture signal. I love this picture, by the way. This this is this the I had an art teacher once who ridiculed me for drawing a lollipop tree because it was like I don't know, it was in seventh grade or something, but I drew a tree with like a round around. That was my conceptualization of a tree. Anyway, I think this is a great representation of what the average person remembers from a given conversation that they have. So what actually was there was just rolling hills and there was clouds and all this stuff. But you actually, if you ask them to remember what they heard in the call and summarize it and pull out the important points, and then be able to articulate it to others, you end up with a much simpler, dumber, dumbed down. I'm going to say dumbed down, but a much more simplistic kind of a pattern. So anyway, that's the warning, right? Don't trust yourself and your own memory to be the only source of information. But then you also look at all these other buyer intent signals that we can look for. And like if you see a target, there's a new CMO or new head of Loc or a new general manager. You can look at new rounds of acquisition, new IPO filings. You can see job postings for the company. And this is an interesting one. If you look at the job postings for the companies that you're interested in, either selling to or working with, you can see what are they prioritizing in terms of the skills that they're trying to acquire. And that can also signal kind of where they are in the maturity level in this as well. You can also look at tech stack moves, partnerships, other signals like this that can help, as well as the AI capability questions in the RFPs or QBRs where the client's signaling or your customers are signaling something based on these patterns. So I think that would be really important. So that's the capture. Then the structure is turn the noise, turn the all this data into kind of something that you can sort of look at as a pattern. So saw this? Was it sales, ops, support, the customers themselves? What type of pattern are we looking at? Are we looking at risk changes? Are we looking at opportunity? Are we looking at friction? Um, don't don't pick too many. I mean, if you're going to start looking at how you can apply AI in a growth ecosystem, you and trying looking at a growth system rather, then don't overdo it, but look at a few candidates. You also want to look at what the tangible impact is. This is a big pet peeve I have is many people talk about sort of AI implementations or whatever the strategic objective is, and they haven't even bothered to roughly quantify how valuable that is, or if the numbers that they've cited are way out of sync, then probably something's wrong with the assumptions that they're making about the impact of this particular signal to this particular impact. And then, of course, the urgency. Some of these are going to be things that have to happen quickly versus the things that happen more slowly. So a way of structuring this into a more practical path is kind of ask yourself these questions, and these are just suggested questions just to show how easy it is to kind of zero down into a kind of thinking about this in ways that humans can really wrap their heads around. Is are we seeing it multiple times? Are we hearing it from multiple different independent sources where the corroboration is filtering out bias? Does it move money? As I mentioned, does it directly impact something? Does it have a direction? Or is it just kind of random? Are you seeing a pattern in a certain direction over time? Or does it have a particular name attached to it? Is it something you can kind of distill down to a specific buyer or account or deal? It doesn't affect everyone. And kind of my editorial comment about this is that it's very easy to talk about the industry or the clients, but in real life, we're talking about many different meaningful subcategories that aren't really in the same boat together. They might seem like they are. And then step three, interpret it. What is it really telling you? And the surface signal isn't necessarily the real signal. So just that they didn't want it is not good enough. And often sales could say, well, we were too expensive. That's the reason we lost this deal. But that's often not really the case. It's just the easiest, most superficial explanation for it. So looking down at the intent, what problem are they actually trying to solve? Look for the pattern, look for the direction. So directionality, there's kind of universality of it. We're looking at that the signal should have some substance to it. And these are some ways of breaking down the interpretation of these. And then there's the action of it. Like, what are you going to do with this information? You're either going to um, make a decision. You're going to make an investment choice. And if you're talking about investment, then there's kind of an ROI conversation in there. It could be it starts a new dialogue. It starts a new pathway to research. It starts a new sort of way of tweaking things or trying things out that you might want to explore to test your hypothesis. And that from a business standpoint, that may mean, hey, customer, my other customers are saying this. Is this also true for you? It inspires you to ask new questions of your customers that might be starting to to test your hypotheses about what's going on out there. So, yeah, what does good look like in this case? Ask yourself what those top signals are, what might be new, what is repeating, what needs action. So these from a and you again, we're still talking about growth and we're talking about AI, but we're talking about growth, the learning loop. We need to know what those signals are. We have to know, are they new for us? Or is there something that means that we might need to change the way that we're doing our work? What is the Kodak? Are we facing a Kodak moment? Are we on the wrong boat, or are we need to double down and actually get really good at something in particular here that our competitors are perhaps leaving behind? So yeah, so the playbook, again, these are my ideas for some things that one can do oneself to try to think about this learning loop. So, we've talked about capturing the stall signals. We can also talk a little bit about the pattern, the buyer behavior signals that might be changing. What could be the blocking issues here, and what might we want to do differently about this? And I think if you're a person of one, just spending some time sort of thinking about what are your signals, which ones of them do you not have enough information about that you might want to go out there and validate, or which ones of them do you think are indicating a shift in your core business or your team's core functionality? Uh, how can we um, how can we detect or do a better job of getting better signal clarity if you have some hunch, some notion, some kernel of an idea? And I think this is getting back to kind of a great use of AI in this case is to brainstorm about these signals. So you can say, I think what could be some signal candidates that I might want to consider based on this. Um, I did this experiment once too with a tool that was used as an evaluation tool, and then collecting a lot of verbal inputs from different people, aggregating it together, and then coming up with a plan, to how to react to this miscellaneous feedback. And the action plan was pretty decent. It was pretty structured, and you could kind of cherry pick which parts you like, and that's where the human judgment kind of plays a nice role here. But it can really emphasize. It can help you think faster and help you think of things that you wouldn't have otherwise thought of before. So, all right. So in this particular exercise, am I welcome the audience if you'd like to sort of throw out some ideas here to mention some signals that you are seeing this week, sort of, and that you could say what you saw, like what kind. I mean, I don't want anybody to share anything, sensitive, obviously, but like what are some signals that you saw? What are and then structure it. Like, is this a risk? Is this an opportunity? Is this a friction? How urgent is it? Uh, and then what is the signal really telling you? Well, what's under the surface for what's going on with that signal? And then what would be an action that one could take based on this signal? So if you want to sort of let that thought process kind of um, inspire you to share something, you're more than welcome to share that in the chat. While we're sort of reflecting on this a little bit, I'm going to kind of turn to Lamise. If I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, especially since you spent You spend a lot of time with sales. Like, how would this apply in the context? And I think this probably mirrors cast quite a lot as well, like the structure of like how you think about this. But how would you use this kind of pattern to apply it in your role?
I watch signals all the time. When I would say the way that I can do it most actively without needing to be live in a customer conversation is LinkedIn. As much noise as there is on LinkedIn, there are a few folks in different roles across IT, marketing, largely on the buyer side, but there are some on the vendor side as well that I find have a particularly good pulse on what's happening in our industry. And sometimes I will search LinkedIn for things like intellectual agency because that's a topic of interest to me, particularly as it pertains to multilingual content generation. So it's really niche where my interests are and how they apply to the client conversations that I'm having. But capturing those signals on paper, I liked that idea of putting it on a sticky note and kind of making that my focus for the week because they're all rattling around in there. So I think the capturing piece is something that salespeople do inherently. We're always trying to get a sense of are people talking about build versus buy or multimodal or intellectual agency, whatever the case may be. And then the structuring piece, I feel, is where what do you do with it once you have that information? So that's where I will have to challenge myself to do. I go from capture to interpret, and I don't do much with structure and act. So this is illuminating for me.
So yeah, you've just sparked a kind of another thought about the requests for innovation because I've been in many times different organizations. I've been in a role of kind of managing innovation. So people come up with ideas, and the idea is really the capture moment. Like, hey, it would be great if we had like that. But the structuring often is much, much harder to do. And that's where you say, okay, if this worked, like if we had this tool that saved it, who, even just starting with the conversation of who would benefit from this AI capability, what what role specifically in the organization would see a uplift based on this particular tool? And then I'll kind of force a conversation of how many hours does it take now to do this? And this is more from a cost reduction mindset, but how much time does this take to do this now versus how much would it take if we had some kind of magical AI tool that did the job for us? And then we look at the delta of that. And if you say, well, we've got 100 hours and of such and such a task at such and such a rate, and we can look at we can cut that in half, then you can extrapolate the order of magnitude. And for those of you who are kind of more business analytics wonks, this is kind of what quants do, right? It's kind of like parking them into these categories based on a relative order of magnitude of how big of an impact they're going to have. And then you can also look at them from a grid, and I don't have a slide about this, but you can kind of visualize a two-dimensional grid where you have the difficulty to implement versus the impact, and you can kind of put things in one of those four quadrants, and then you target the high impact, low effort ones first, and then you kind of move into the high impact, high effort, or the low impact, low effort sometimes can actually be relatively easy. But the high effort, low impact, obviously you throw those away. But if you haven't thought about like how big of a needle move are you talking about here, then you're not having a conversation about growth. And then the interpretation is like, what can you conclude about this? Is this a system, a signal system that we can move on or not? What are our possible solution candidates for this? And then you decide to test your hypothesis and move forward with something. So yeah, I think the structure is a really important part of this signal. So let's do another poll. And again, remember these polls are for you too. So you can, by sharing your thoughts, you're helping the audience to kind of get a sense for their kind of aspects of this. But which part of these is the hardest to do? So Lamise, for example, mentioned the structure part was a little bit harder. Which part do you think is the hardest one for you? So I think for me personally, I'm not trying to give this answer away, but for me, action is the hardest part because I come up with all these ideas. I love structuring them. I love interpreting them. But then for me, the design of the solution is the fun part, and then the actual implementation of it becomes sort of more of a it feels harder for me to stay consistent and focused on it, or to take the time really distilling it down and making sure that I'm actioning on my next steps. So I need to consciously remind myself to and sometimes sticky notes or making bulleted lists of just reminding myself of which things I need to move the ball forward on. The action part of it ends up being my personal weakness, just because I'm more of a idea person. I'm more of a systems thinker. Um, so let's see. Do we have any other? Okay, so here's some results. Um, so it looks like we have structure and action. Yeah. And that, okay, that makes sense. Like, so capturing relatively easy, interpretation, we have the data, but we have not read it. Seems like if we have the data, we are interpreting it or doing our best to interpret it. But perhaps because of structure, if we don't have good structure, then the interpretation sometimes is ungrounded. It's not connected to something that you can really sink your teeth into. And then, of course, the action. I just mentioned my challenges with sometimes keeping the action engine going. Okay, so ready to move on to application. So this is, I'm sort of thinking about this through the lens of an organization that has a sales entity or sales and marketing function, account management and operations. Um, so this is this is an attempt to map the signals by ownership, because not all signals are owned collectively within an organization. And I think this is something where, regardless of what kind of organization you're in, there are owners for the information, and there's people who can benefit from that information. Now, in the if I have this pretty pretty strong feeling about the flow of information within an organization. And one of the challenges with growth is that the people who have the information don't have any use for it, and the people who need the information don't have any handle on it. And a really good simple example of that is operations typically has these great deployment stories or these challenges that of things that they ran across or these accomplishments that they were able to deliver, but they're so busy delivering that they don't really have any time to step back and kind of summarize or monitor the outcome of their exercise. And as a result, the people who could benefit from this um, won't have that information. So the sales team, for example, wants these user stories of successful deployments, but they don't have them. Meanwhile, the sales team might be getting these buyer signals out there in the market, and the tech team doesn't have, like, what are clients asking? What are the tools that we need to build? How do we know what is worth building as an organization from a CTO perspective? But the sales team, that's all captured in meeting notes, and it's all just sort of like win-loss stuff. And as soon as you lose it, it's out the door. You don't pay attention to that anymore. So extracting those signals about what to build, what capabilities do we need to have in the future, what uh, what um, what kind of successes have we had in operations that we could sort of translate into marketing stories. All of these things are places where information is not sitting in the hands of the people who need it. So I'm suggesting that at an organizational level, that in order to grow, you need to define the signals that you need to monitor, assign the signal to somebody. So, for example, buyer market behavior signals should be captured by the sales team, the BD, or anybody who's going out to conferences. You figure out what signals you want to pay attention to. Marketing team structures it. So Libor would sort of look at all this input and say, here's what I'm seeing here, and then that gets interpreted by, say, the head of growth or the sales lead, or the CRO or CSO or the chief. And then at that point, there's kind of that signal then can be shared with the rest of the organization. Um, Libor, I just used you as an example. Did I correctly describe kind of some of the signal environment as you experience it?
think it's spot on, yeah. I mean, of course, every company is a little bit different. It's based on the people, but in general, makes total sense to me based on my experience. So yeah, well done,
Yeah.
Eric. Well done.
So capturing these signals, and I think doing so intentionally. Now, of course, if you're just one person, you don't necessarily have the full picture with you can't necessarily do it all. But I still think that if you as a person are thinking about these signals and then thinking about how AI can either help to capture, structure, interpret, or action, there's tools for all of this. Like there's tools that give people the capability for any of these individually, but you have to choose the signal that you're trying to pay attention to and track that. So, and that's kind of I mentioned at the very top of the presentation that there's kind of good news here for us that organizations don't necessarily fail differently than individuals. They fail the same way at scale. And I think the signal blindness for an individual means sort of you miss what the clients are telling you. You heard one thing, but there's a nuance to that you didn't really quite capture. Maybe because in your lollipop tree version of the story, you simply forgot some key data because you didn't have a notes taker taking it, and maybe you were in the middle of a different idea at that time, or there's an opportunity to miss the signal. But at an organizational level, it's harder because the functions are separated. And very often those functions are incented to pay attention to the signals that they are themselves responsible for, rather than collecting signal that could be useful for other parts of the organization. So I think thinking about the organizational structure and then which signals apply to the organization as a whole, and then how to map those signals from where they could be collected to where they could be consumed in the most sensible manner. From the innovation drift, kind of staying busy but not improving outcomes versus the full roadmap, the full customer outcomes flat. Uh, Both of these phenomenons, I can say personally on a personal note, I use AI constantly. I have like lots and lots of different tools on my desktop, but I was very, very busy at one point, and I I asked AI to say why I'm really, really busy at this point. How do I give me some ideas about how to think about this? And I gave it all the different projects that I'm working on, and it said these are the long-term ones that you really should prioritize. These are probably like wrap these up and get them off your plate. They're not going to add much long-term value to you. These ones are, and then these ones have a deadline and you need to deliver to them. But rethink twice about accepting this particular responsibility in the future because this isn't really helping you. So, I mean, AI can be a personal assistant even to help you think about your own prioritization structure as well as the organization structure as a whole. So if it's just think about the innovation drift problem, is the organization applying itself in innovation and investing in innovation in the right kind of way? Have you structured what that investment would deliver? And are you tying this to clear outcomes that you are also able to tie to market signals that you know that customers are going to be interested in? Or is this innovation theater where there's a lot of a very, very cool demo? It looks cool, but it's completely impossible to actually deploy it anywhere. There's no kind of anchor where you can actually monetize it, or you can't actually hand it over to somebody. So the net outcome is, wow, that's really cool what you're doing, but I can't use it. This isn't helpful. Uh, that is the kind of thing that we want to be especially vigilant about. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but hopefully you're seeing some mirroring here of each of these different themes here. That these failure modes are essentially described by Bain. I mean, these were part of that original research that I was mentioning about earlier. We probably are at some level challenged by these failure modes all the time, and they may or may not manifest in meaningful failure outcomes or growth outcomes. But these are likely the reasons why growth could be stalling for for many of us, just based on the pattern of the entire. Um, um, yeah, thanks for Virginia. I did say that out loud, and it's in the transcript. I did ask AI to help me prioritize all my tasks. And it gave me some really interesting thoughts about why, based on, of course, the information that I had provided it. So it wasn't just random. So turning this into activity, turning activity into a signal system, think about the captures. Um, think about the interpretation. So, um, and I think you might be able to capture how often do clients wait longer than 5 days to respond to a demo or a proposal. Like that could be a signal where you're seeing a longer and longer response time. That could be giving you some like something's changing. So people aren't reacting as quickly to this as they used to. What's really driving the deal, the buyer or the budget? Um, and I think customer-centric selling is a really has a good framework for thinking about the underlying incentives of the different people in the buying, especially in a complex B2B ecosystem, like what the different motivations are and how to handle objections or manage the needs of each of the stakeholders within a complex buying ecosystem. But so AI can play a role in those things, but I also think that strategy and good judgment are probably still essential. Large account management is a complex or is fundamentally complex. It's also fundamentally different than something where you're selling the same widget to a large number of people versus selling a custom bespoke service to individual stakeholders. There are different market sectors that all of us are involved with, and the individual signals that are going to matter to us are going to depend on where we are in each of our market ecosystems. So the idea is to change these things from, well, okay, let me back up here a little bit. I think I, these slides here from sales, account management, operations, each of these slides is intended to give a person who is in this role some idea about how this applies to them in this particular context. So these slides will be available afterwards, and I do encourage folks to sort of find the signal that is relevant for them and to put yourself into this picture in the way that makes the most amount of sense to you. So okay, so this is kind of looking at our industry again from using this lens, like what the signal is telling us, how this applies to our particular ecosystem. And I have mentioned this in various talks before, but there's kind of a word producer is an LSP is a word producer, and they measure their output based on the number of words that they produced. What is their margin on those words? Kind of an arbitrage, and then that's just kind of like how many you do, and it's just presumed to all be right. But I think we're seeing a shift, and this is kind of Eric's opinion, but I think the signal is it's clearly shifting to a risk ownership model. I think Renato has also pointed this out too, where we're insurance companies essentially. We're there to we're there to apply an outside accountable entity for the translation, right? So it's not about the translation of the words because those are cheap. Like they cost almost nothing now to get words translated. What is a lot more expensive is owning the consequences. And so when buyers say we don't need translation, we just use AI, they've unbundled this category. They've the pieces they the output is cheap, but the accountability is expensive. So if that's the case, then positioning yourself as an organization around risk ownership becomes the bigger sort of emphasis to that. And so I think when we translate this into kind of the repositioning exercise here, like linguistic engineering is like from we translate words into we design and govern your multilingual content pipeline, that there's a whole bunch of different new services that can be offered in that bundle, like from pipeline design, workflow design, model selection, QA gates, like what is the appropriate account auditability, the visibility of it, the responsible AI documentation for it. Or if you look at the risk visibility for buyers, you can we sell quality, but if you say we have risk visibility, if we understand where the risks are, and we can show you where they are, we can show you where you're exposed. then that can even become a passive service after even publishing to monitor where there could be risk opportunities. Like, for example, there's tools out there like Conductor that kind of monitor your website's overall performance, and it's actually pretty amazing how much detail it can tell you about your own website if you have a complex website. And that can show areas of risk. So I think if that monitor was sitting on top of somebody's website and monitoring it actually um, post published, that business model of just like, hey, we're going to monitor this stuff and we're going to do statistical sampling for it. We're going to have AI assist this, and we're going to help you make sure that you aren't accidentally publishing something that's not safe for your organization. Or you can put yourself as again, this is kind of a drawing from real life, an internal localization team who's like, well, I can't control all you other departments doing your localization, your translation, but I can be here as a resource to check whether or not your AI translations are going to be problematic, and we can give you feedback based on the risk profile of your content. Anyway, so validate. So if the signal is from word producer to risk owner, then these different cards here represent different ways of structuring your service around a new language and a new positioning. And there's new AI capabilities that plug into each of these growth patterns. So what's the assumption here is that you create a feedback loop. And if you have a signal system, you'll notice more, you'll structure better, you'll interpret faster, you'll act earlier. Everybody has access to the same tools now, so it's not going to be that hard for people to use these things. So I think that you have to in order to stay relevant. The question is, how well can you do it? That becomes the differentiator. And I think instead of behavioral shifts, we're talking about these failure modes. There's behavior fixes, but then there's also like what can you do to change behavior to address these particular failure modes. So if, for example, you have a capacity gaps problem, then the behavioral fix is like a micro skills adaptation. You might sort of schedule some time to learn something every month. Personally, I'm taking a certificate program for strategic AI. And even though I'm an advisor for the program, so I'm getting to give them insight for where I think they need to fix their model, I'm also learning a lot too. So I think having a training kind of mindset about filling in the capacity gaps for yourself and your organization are the behavioral response to that failure mode capability. And then again, as promised, here kind of the playbook. These I'm not going to delve into these in detail. Take your time and sort of think about these, but I think maybe run a capture, interpret, act review once on one stalled deal per week or every time it happens to start think about what was the signal that we missed, what could have been different, is this something we can act on or not? Okay, tool stack. So this is about AI, and okay, you have to talk about tools. And I'm very resistant about talking about individual tools because tools don't create signal systems. And if you get hung up on which tools, like what's the greatest tool or whatever, then the probability is much higher that you'll deploy something that isn't addressing a signal that you're actually trying that you care about. And I think this is kind of the manifestation of AI slop that people talk about is really using a tool without really understanding the core structure, the core system that you're trying to use. And by not structuring, not using the AI to correctly to generate content that is fit for use and not sort of putting into it the right accountability layers, then you get this junk. That's kind of the natural consequence of garbage in, kind of garbage out. So a new tool doesn't really do this. And I think this is also a big red flag as well, that the tools that were helpful in the past are not necessarily the same ones that will be helpful in the future. So I always advocate thinking down to what is the business purpose at the core, and then to be able to bring that back up to okay, is this tool really the right fit for this particular business function? But here's a smattering of some tools here. I mean, I think it's far more important to use what you have, but use it consistently and to pay attention to the signals than it is to sort of chase the best tools. But capturing tools, there's a bunch of them for capturing. Like there's note takers. Notion is a fantastic tool. You have kind of project management trackers like Asana or Microsoft Teams or Coda or Basecamp. In fact, I grabbed a signal out of Basecamp for this presentation by taking all your comments, feeding them into AI and saying, what are the signals we're seeing here? What are the patterns that I'm looking for? What does this audience want to hear more about? And that informed how I structured this deck because of the feedback that you gave me about this, that I used that signal to kind of feed back into this narrative. Structuring tools. Excel, believe it or not, is still a fabulous tool for structuring things, and there's AI plugins that you can plug into it. Airtable, there's lots of custom capabilities within CRM. At one of the organizations I worked for, we annotated all the projects that we worked for to find all the unit types that we were bidding, and then I mapped that and I looked at all the different win-loss ratio for 400 different projects across all these different use cases. And then I looked at what signal am I able to get from the bids that were all these 400 bids are telling me something. I had information about the direction that the company was going before the CEO did, because I had been the first one to kind of look at the pattern here and say, hey, based on this, the pattern of bid requests is going in the opposite direction of where you're saying you want the company to go. So that's a huge disconnect in where you think the market is going versus what the buyers are telling you that they want. So anyway, really important to capture, structure, interpret. Claude, GPT, Perplexity, and your own brain is a great interpretation tool. And then, of course, the actions, converting that into something that you can actually use, Slack, Teams, email, workflows, all this stuff. That starts becoming easy. Once you know and have a clear signal and you're looking at how that needle is moving, then you're going to be able to build a much stronger cycle. So AI does help with signal capture, not so much with uncertainty, bad data, bad results. That AI can't really it can't interpret information that doesn't exist. It can't replace relationships. It can't replace trust. It can't replace accountability. So I think so important to not let it do your thinking for you, but make sure that you're still holding the handlebars of the tool. But I think that having a signal mindset is the way to kind of unpack all this stuff. So the playbook, again, I'm not going to, this is all going to be shared afterwards, but I'm trying to give you some concrete ways of start thinking about, like, pick a signal, look at your AI versus human inventory, which decisions or which steps could be AI assisted or AI owned. And if you're seeing some that aren't paying for themselves or tools that aren't really converting into kind of meaningful signal, then maybe you don't need that tool anymore and you can kick that off your stack. But it should be based on that signal. And the signal could be risk, it could be cost reduction, it could be enablement, or something is able to be done because this tool exists, so you wouldn't be able to even invoice for without it. Or it could be a differentiator. And I think that's a whole ROI language that's kind of another sort of framework that is a little outside the scope of this. But anytime you're talking about implementing a tool or hiring a person, is exactly the same framework to think about what is it that you're getting for this investment and how does this convert into improving the signal system that you have put into place. So synthesis, kind of backing up and thinking about the big picture here. Growth is not a people problem. It's not a strategy problem. It's not even, I mean, it's a signal problem. And I think any organization, if they can get their signals right and they can harmonize their marketing to their selling something that the market wants and understanding what it wants and selling to that want, being able to sell well using good signal detection in that sales process to delivery, and then learning things from that delivery process that will bring new information into like what are you doing well, what do you need to enhance, where are the choke points, and then the strategy. And the strategy becomes kind of this component of a signal ecosystem that an organization needs to survive. So if you fix the signals and you create the right feedback loops, then growth will happen. If you ignore the signals or you react to the wrong signals, then it's not going to work. It simply can't. And the data is there to support that. So again, kind of synthesis here, closing up like my big sort of, if you remembered only one thing, notice, pay attention. So maybe be creative about what you think a signal might be. Sometimes a signal is an absence of information. So think about where the signals could be here. Think about where your churn is happening. Think about, you know, sometimes, you know, everybody lies. Clients sometimes lie to you too, or your other stakeholders. They're too polite to really tell you the true story. So notice when there might be some missing things there that are changing about the way that they're engaging with you, and then create these loops, feedback loops, test your hypothesis and redo them, and then make some actions to that. Execution is way better than knowledge. As the story I told earlier, don't be afraid of trying out new things, because if you're tinkering and your competitors aren't, even if you don't get it perfect, you'll still know more about it just by having tried it out. Even if it fails, it can be an important signal. Yeah, I have 1 minute to tell you a fun story about what I consider one of my most successful failures. Was I was trying an experiment to see whether or not I could get an interpreter to do a transcript, to do an audio voiceover, or instead of doing like video translation is very expensive, right? So you have to take the transcript, translate it, then kind of recalibrate it based on the time codes, and then you kind of get the voice, the new translation voice queued up and all that stuff. And I thought, I'll just skip all this and have an interpreter do the whole thing. And it ended up coming out really well. The interpreter did a good job, but it ultimately ended up being a failure because it's just not a really great use case of that particular case. But the client was so impressed that I was willing to try something nutty like that, that I had won his loyalty for life. Like, I think that just willingness to be open with experimentation can sometimes be a differentiator in and of itself. So ship before perfect, build a test log, iterate, share inside out. Like, make sure your learnings are thoughtful and honest, and share them. And then I put together a few signals here that you might find useful. Like, there's market signals, sales signals. Again, this will be shared afterwards. I'm not going to read through all this, but there's like just this account information, NPS scores changing, trending up, trending down. Volume drops month on month could be a signal that just the work is disappearing. And you should check into it. I also put together this loose little sort of self-audit score thing. I mean, I don't like self quizzes myself, but this is kind of an idea of getting kind of a self audit in place, of just like score yourself on these, and to help build that thing. But I think right now is kind of an opportunity for you to think about, where would you start? Like, what is the signal that you'd start with, if you wanted to get started first thing tomorrow or on Monday? Like, what are the signals that are going to change your life? Here, I also wanted to share the references that were important to me. These are all articles there's a Gartner report, there's Slater, there's CSA, there's Harvard Business Review, so on. I kind of read a lot of things in preparation for this session to try to make sure that what I was telling you wasn't just kind of my own personal opinion, but was backed up with some basic facts. So with that, we have 5 minutes for Q&A, and happy to take any questions or feedback.
If anyone wants to ask questions, you can raise your hand and we'll open your microphones and you can talk directly to Eric.
So Jose did ask, I'll kind of go back to a few minutes ago. If it's not about tools, then what is the signal monitoring system? Is it a function? If so, where should it sit in the org? Who is best qualified to run it? Can sales be trusted if they often don't really understand the business? Well, that last one, I'm not gonna that that one's kind of funny, but I think that tools are incredibly valuable. AI is a tool. I'm not saying don't use tools. I'm saying only use tools when you understand what you're trying to use them for first. So think about the signal. And if you're saying to your sales team, I want I want a synthesis of all the failure modes or the reasons that we lost business. And you can't say, and price, of course, is going to be one of them, but I want a deeper analysis. I want a deeper post-mortem on all the lost opportunities out here. And which signals did we miss? Which signals, what would we have needed to have known to win this? Uh, if you're having an honest conversation, and to be fair, you have to make this a safe space for the people who are involved with an honest conversation. That's a different, kind of entirely different conversation about organizational management. But if your sales team feels threatened and that they need to, justify activity, then of course you might find that they're going to be willing and able to, what's the right word? Creatively tell narratives that support their non-delivery. I think that is far kind of not desirable. But if you create a safe environment to have some honest conversations about what is the market really telling you here, then you can maybe have a healthier conversation about where the organization needs to go from here. Okay, well, I think I would love to thank Libor and Lamis, my colleagues on this, with whom I have spent hours putting this whole show together. I hope that it was as rewarding for you as it was for me to kind of work together on this, to share these ideas. Um, Thank you all for attending. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for participating in the polls. And yeah, have a fantastic rest of your day. And if you want to geek out about any of this stuff, I'm happy to do so. Link it, connect to me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email. I'm happy to brainstorm about it. So
Okay. Well, thank you, Libor, Lemise, and Eric. It was 3 great sessions. Thank you to everyone who attended. As always, the recording will be in Basecamp, and I'm going to put a link to a feedback form. We would like to know what you think of this academy, but most importantly, what other topics you would like to see discussed in the future, and maybe, just maybe, also an advanced sales, marketing, and growth session in the near future. So just give us your feedback, give us your ideas, and we'll do our best to answer. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
And thank you, Isa, as well.
thank you, everyone.